The rain hammered against the dark umbrella I held over my head. Cold drops still managed to find their way down the back of my neck, making me shiver in my black funeral dress. I stood at the edge of the freshly dug grave and watched as they lowered the casket into the ground. Marcus Dwayne Johnson, beloved husband. That's what the headstone would say once it was placed. I clutched a single white rose in my trembling hand. My best friend Keisha stood beside me, her arm around my shoulders. I felt her squeeze gently, trying to offer comfort. But nothing could comfort me. My husband of 8 years was gone, dead at 39 from a sudden heart attack, while on a business trip to Houston. Or so they told me. The doctor at the hospital had explained it all. Massive cardiac arrest. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. I remember getting that phone call at 11 at night. The cold, clinical voice of the hospital administrator. Mrs. Johnson, I'm very sorry to inform you. Your husband was brought to our emergency room this evening. We did everything we could. I'm so sorry for your loss. Just like that, my world shattered. I flew to Houston the next morning. I had to identify his body. That was the worst part. Seeing him there on that cold metal table, so still, so pale. But it was him. His face, his hands, the small scar above his left eyebrow from when he fell off his bike as a kid. It was definitely Marcus. They told me he had been found in his hotel room by housekeeping. He had complained of chest pain earlier that day to a colleague. But Marcus being Marcus, he brushed it off. Said he probably just ate something that didn't agree with him. By the time housekeeping found him and called 911, it was too late. Now, 2 weeks later, I stood at his grave. The funeral had been beautiful, if such a thing can be beautiful. Over 200 people came. Friends, family, colleagues from the insurance company where Marcus worked as a senior claims adjuster. Everyone loved Marcus. He was charming, funny, always ready with a joke or a kind word. That's what everyone said at the service. What a great guy. Gone too soon. Such a tragedy. His mother, Miss Lorraine, had been inconsolable. She wailed and threw herself on the casket before they closed it. His sister, Tamika, had to pull her away. I stood there dry-eyed through most of it, still in shock. It didn't feel real. How could Marcus be dead? Just last month, we had celebrated our 8th anniversary. We went to that fancy steakhouse downtown, the one with the tablecloths so white they almost glowed. Marcus had ordered champagne, even though we usually didn't drink much. We toasted to 8 more years, then 8 more after that. Forever, he said, looking into my eyes. You and me forever, baby. Now forever had come to an early end. The pastor finished his final prayer. People began to drift away, heading back to their cars, anxious to get out of the rain. Keisha tugged gently on my arm. Come on, honey. Let's get you home. You need to rest. I nodded and dropped the white rose onto the casket. Goodbye, Marcus. I love you. The words caught in my throat. Keisha led me away, back to her car. We drove in silence through the gray streets. My mind was numb. Everything felt like I was moving through water, slow and heavy. When we got to my house, the house I had shared with Marcus for the past 5 years, Keisha helped me inside. Several people from the funeral had already gathered here for the repast. The dining room table was covered with dishes people had brought. Fried chicken, mac and cheese, greens, potato salad, dinner rolls, peach cobbler. All the comfort foods. But I had no appetite. Miss Lorraine sat on my couch, still crying into a tissue. Tamika sat beside her, rubbing her back. Other relatives I barely knew filled the living room and kitchen, talking in hushed tones, picking at the food. I just wanted them all to leave. I wanted to be alone. But I knew that wouldn't happen for hours. So I did what I had been doing for 2 weeks. I put on a brave face. I accepted condolences. I listened to stories about Marcus. I nodded and smiled at appropriate times. And inside, I felt absolutely nothing. The numbness was almost a relief. It was better than the pain I knew would come later. Keisha stayed with me that night after everyone finally left. She insisted on it. Said she didn't want me to be alone. I was grateful. We sat on the couch together in the quiet house, not talking much, just being present. Girl, I don't even know what to say. Keisha finally broke the silence. I'm so sorry. This just doesn't seem real. It doesn't. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. One day he's here, the next day he's gone. Just like that. Have you thought about what you're going to do? Keisha asked gently. I mean, with work and everything? I had been a teacher at the local middle school for 6 years. I taught 7th grade English. I love my job, love the kids. But I had taken a leave of absence after Marcus died. The principal told me to take all the time I needed. I don't know. I guess I'll go back in a few weeks. I need to keep busy. Need something to do or I'll go crazy. What about money? Keisha asked. Will you be okay? I nodded. Marcus had a life insurance policy through his job. $500,000. It seemed like an insane amount when he first told me about it years ago. I remember joking that I was worth more dead than alive. He had laughed and kissed me and said, let's hope you never have to find out. Now I would be finding out. The policy would pay out in a few weeks, once all the paperwork was processed. Along with his 401k and our savings, I would be financially secure. It was a cold comfort. I would give it all back in a heartbeat to have Marcus alive. But at least I wouldn't have to worry about paying the mortgage or bills. Silver linings, I guess. Keisha stayed for 3 more days before she had to go back to work. She was a nurse at the hospital, and her schedule was demanding. She made me promise to call her every day. Made me promise to eat actual meals. Made me promise not to sit in the dark house by myself all day. I promised all of it, even though I wasn't sure I could keep those promises. The weeks crawled by. I went through the motions. I met with the insurance company, filled out endless forms, provided death certificates and documentation. I cleaned out Marcus's closet, boxing up his clothes to donate. I couldn't bear to look at his suits hanging there, his shoes lined up neatly on the rack. I packed up his toiletries from the bathroom, his electric razor, his cologne that still smelled like him, his toothbrush. Such small things, such painful reminders. His mother asked if she could have some of his things. His watch, his wedding ring, some photos. Of course I said yes. She was his mother. She deserved to have something to remember him by. 6 weeks passed, then 2 months, then 3. The life insurance money came through. $500,000 deposited into my account. I stared at the number on my computer screen. $500,000. Blood money, I thought. I would never think of it any other way. I paid off the house, paid off my car, put the rest in savings. What else was I supposed to do with it? I went back to work after spring break. The kids were sweet, if a little awkward. They knew what had happened. Mrs. Johnson's husband died. Be nice to her. They tiptoed around me for the first week, unsure how to act. But slowly, things returned to normal. Teaching was good for me. It kept my mind occupied, kept me from sitting at home drowning in memories and what-ifs. The school year ended. Summer came. Hot, humid Atlanta summers that made the air feel like soup. I spent my days trying to figure out what to do with myself. Keisha dragged me out sometimes. Lunch, shopping, movies, anything to get me out of the house. I appreciated her efforts, even when I didn't feel like going. You've got to start living again, she would say. Marcus would want you to be happy. I know he would. I would nod and agree. Even though I didn't feel happy, I felt empty, like part of me had died with Marcus, but I was trying. That had to count for something. 6 months after Marcus died, I finally felt ready to start sorting through more of his things. Things I had avoided touching. His desk in the home office, his nightstand drawer, his trunk in the garage, full of old college stuff and random junk he never threw away. I decided to start with the easy stuff, the garage trunk. I pulled it out on a Saturday morning in August. It was hot already, even in the garage. I sat on the concrete floor and opened the lid. Just like I remembered, it was full of old stuff. His college textbooks, a ratty baseball cap from his fraternity, ticket stubs from concerts, old birthday cards, and letters. I smiled at some of it. Marcus had been a sentimental guy. He kept everything. At the bottom of the trunk, I found a shoebox. I opened it, expecting more old photos or letters. Instead, I found something that made my stomach drop. Bank statements, but not from our bank. From a bank I had never heard of. Coastal Community Bank. The statements were addressed to Marcus, but sent to a P.O. box. The most recent one was dated 2 weeks before he died. I opened it with shaking hands. The account had over $60,000 in it. My mind raced. What was this? Why did Marcus have a secret bank account? And where did $60,000 come from? We didn't have that kind of money lying around. Our joint account usually had maybe $8,000 in it on a good month. I looked at the older statements. Deposits going back 3 years. Thousands of dollars at a time, deposited every few months. The amounts varied. Sometimes $5,000, sometimes $12,000. My heart pounded. What had Marcus been doing? I sat there on the garage floor, sweating in the heat, staring at these statements. Think, I told myself. Think. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a bonus from work he was saving as a surprise for me. Maybe it was an inheritance from a relative. Maybe. But deep down I knew. Something was very wrong. I gathered up all the statements and took them inside. I spread them out on the dining room table and studied them more carefully. The deposits were irregular. No pattern I could see. But I did notice something else. The deposits always happened right after Marcus came back from one of his business trips. He traveled a lot for work. Houston, Dallas, Charlotte, Nashville. Always investigating insurance claims, meeting with clients, attending conferences. Or so he said. My hand started to shake. No. Marcus wouldn't. He couldn't. We had a good marriage. We loved each other. He wouldn't cheat on me. He wouldn't lie to me. But that money had to come from somewhere. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. I went back through 3 years of statements, matching dates. Every time Marcus went on a business trip, there was a charge to his credit card for a hotel. But I also noticed something I had never paid attention to before. Charges to restaurants, bars, stores. Way more charges than made sense for a business trip. And the amounts were high. Dinners for $200, $300. Bar tabs for $150. What kind of business dinners were those? Then I noticed charges from stores I recognized. Victoria's Secret, Sephora, designer boutiques. My stomach turned. Marcus never bought me things from those stores. He usually got me practical gifts. Books, kitchen gadgets, gift cards. So who is he buying lingerie and makeup and designer purses for? I felt sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. This couldn't be happening. Marcus was dead. How could I be finding out 6 months after his death that he might have been cheating on me? And stealing money? The deposits had to be coming from somewhere. Oh my God. Insurance fraud. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt. Marcus was an insurance claims adjuster. He investigated claims for car accidents, property damage, liability cases. He decided how much money to pay out. What if he was taking kickbacks? What if he was approving fraudulent claims and getting paid under the table? That would explain the secret bank account. That would explain the irregular deposits. That would explain everything. I sat on the bathroom floor, my back against the cold tile wall, and tried to process this. My husband, the man I loved, the man I mourned, had been a criminal, a fraud, and probably a cheater. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I was too shocked, too numb. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour maybe. Finally, I got up. I washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and puffy. My hair was a mess. I looked like hell. Good, I thought. That's how I feel. I walked back to the dining room and stared at the bank statements. What was I supposed to do with this information? Tell someone? Tell the police? Tell his employer? Turn in a dead man? But then I thought about that $500,000 sitting in my savings account. If it came out that Marcus was committing insurance fraud, would they make me give back the life insurance money? Would they say I was involved somehow? Would I get in trouble? I had to know more before I did anything. I had to find out exactly what Marcus had been doing. I spent the rest of that day and all of Sunday digging through everything I could find. His laptop, his emails, his phone records. I found emails from a name I didn't recognize. Simone Winters. The emails were flirty, affectionate. Baby, I miss you. Can't wait to see you next week. Last night was amazing. The hotel room with the jacuzzi tub was perfect. I felt like someone was stabbing me in the heart with each email I read. Marcus had been having an affair for at least 3 years, based on the emails, and this Simone person knew all about it. They had stayed in hotels together. They had gone to dinner together. She even joked in one email about how good Marcus was at hiding his secret life from his boring wife at home. That one made me want to throw the laptop across the room. But I kept reading. I had to know everything. The emails also mentioned money. Marcus telling Simone not to worry, that he would take care of her. Simone thanking him for the new purse, the new necklace, the money for her rent. She was using him, and he was letting her. No, not letting her. Funding her. With stolen money. By Sunday night, I had a pretty clear picture. Marcus had been running an insurance fraud scheme for at least 3 years, possibly longer. He was approving fake claims, or inflating real claims and getting kickbacks. He was putting that money in a secret bank account. He was using some of that money to support a mistress named Simone Winters who lived in Houston. He was lying to me every time he said he was going on a business trip. Sometimes he really was working, but sometimes he was just visiting her, living a whole other life. I felt betrayed, angry, heartbroken all over again. But underneath all of that, something else was starting to grow. Suspicion. Marcus died in Houston, in a hotel room, during a business trip. Or what he told me was a business trip. What if he was really there visiting Simone? The hospital said he died of a heart attack. But they also said he had been alone in the hotel room. What if that wasn't true? What if Simone had been there? What if something else had happened? My mind was racing now, spinning out wild theories. But they didn't seem that wild anymore. Not after everything I had found. I grabbed my phone and called the hospital in Houston. It took me 20 minutes of being transferred from person to person before I finally got someone who could access Marcus's records. I'm his wife, I explained. I just have a few questions about what happened. The nurse was kind but professional. She pulled up the records. Let me see. Mr. Johnson was brought in by ambulance at approximately 10:15 p.m. He was unresponsive. The paramedics had attempted CPR en route. He was pronounced dead at 10:41 p.m. Cause of death was cardiac arrest. Was anyone with him when he died? I asked, when the paramedics found him. She paused. Let me check. No, it says here he was found alone in his hotel room by housekeeping. They called 911. What hotel? I asked. The Marriott Westchase. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called the hotel. I told them I was Marcus's wife, and I wanted to understand what happened that night. Could they tell me anything? The manager was sympathetic. He looked up the records. Mr. Johnson had been staying in room 412 for 3 nights. On the night of his death, housekeeping knocked on the door at around 9:45 p.m. to turn down the bed. There was no answer, but they could hear the TV on. They assumed he was asleep and left. When they came back at 10 p.m. to try again, they used their key to enter and found Mr. Johnson collapsed on the floor. They immediately called. 911, was he alone? I asked. The manager hesitated. As far as we know, yes, but the room was registered to him as a single occupant. As far as you know? I pressed. Did anyone see him with anyone else that day or evening? Another pause. Let me check with the front desk staff who were working that night. Can I call you back? He called me back an hour later. Mrs. Johnson, I spoke with my staff. One of the front desk clerks remembers seeing Mr. Johnson with a woman earlier that evening, around 7 p.m. They went up to his room together. But we don't have any information about when she left or who she was. My suspicions were confirmed. Simone had been there. So why did she leave before calling for help? Or did she call for help and then leave? Or worse, did she just leave without calling anyone and let Marcus die? My mind was reeling, but I kept my voice calm. Thank you for the information. Do you have security camera footage from that night? The manager said they did, but it had probably been recorded over by now unless the police had requested it. And since Marcus's death had been ruled natural causes, there had been no police investigation. Of course not. Why would there be? A man had a heart attack in his hotel room. Tragic, but not suspicious. Except now it felt very suspicious to me. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. What was I supposed to do with all this information? Part of me wanted to let it go. Marcus was dead. Learning he was a cheater and a fraud didn't change that. It just meant I had to change how I remembered him. But the other part of me couldn't let it go. If Simone had been there when Marcus died and didn't help him, she was responsible. If she just left him there, maybe he could have been saved. Maybe he would still be alive. And if Marcus was running an insurance fraud scheme, other people were being hurt. The insurance company was losing money. Policyholders might be paying higher premiums because of fraud like this. It wasn't victimless. I couldn't just ignore it. Over the next few days, I did more digging. I found Simone Winters on social media. Facebook, Instagram. She was beautiful, I'll admit. Young, maybe 27 or 28. Long dark hair, perfect makeup, designer clothes in every photo. She posted constantly. Brunch at fancy restaurants. Shopping trips. Weekend getaways. Living a lifestyle she definitely couldn't afford on her own. Her Facebook said she worked as a medical receptionist. That didn't pay for Chanel bags and first-class flights. I scrolled through her photos going back 3 years. And there, mixed in between selfies and food pics, were occasional photos that made my blood boil. A photo of champagne glasses with the caption, "Celebrating with my favorite person." A photo of a man's hand holding hers. You couldn't see his face, but I recognized that watch. It was Marcus's. A photo from inside a hotel room with city lights visible through the window. Caption, "Best weekend ever." She never tagged him, never said his name, but I knew. I kept scrolling, and then I saw something that made me stop breathing. A photo posted 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago was 5.5 months after Marcus died. The photo showed Simone sitting at an outdoor cafe, smiling at the camera. She was wearing a sundress and sunglasses. The caption said "Brunch with my babe." She looked happy, relaxed, very much not mourning. But that wasn't what shocked me. In the background of the photo, slightly out of focus but still visible, was a man sitting across from her at the table. You could only see part of his profile, his hand reaching for a coffee cup. But I recognized that hand. I recognized that watch. It was the same watch from the earlier photos. It was Marcus's watch, a very distinctive Omega Seamaster with a blue face and steel band. I had given it to him for our 5th anniversary. There was no mistaking it. And if that was Marcus's watch, then that meant. No, that was impossible. I looked at the photo again, zooming in as much as I could. The image got pixelated, but I could make out more details. The man's build, his posture, the shape of his head. My heart started pounding. I looked at more recent photos. There, 2 weeks ago. Another photo. This time a pic Simone had posted of a sunset with the caption, "Perfect evening." But in the reflection of the window behind her, you could see a figure. A man walking past. Blurry, but there. I zoomed in. Dark skin. Short hair. The right height. 1 week ago. A photo of dinner plates at a restaurant. But in the background, way in the background, sitting at another table. A man in a gray shirt. I couldn't see his face. He was looking down at his phone. But something about him looked familiar. I felt dizzy. This was insane. Marcus was dead. I saw his body. I went to his funeral. I watched them lower him into the ground. But what if? No, that was crazy. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept staring at these photos. That watch. That build. That profile. What if Marcus wasn't dead? What if he faked his own death? To get the insurance money. To run away with his mistress. To escape his life, his fraud, his marriage. It seemed impossible. But was it? He worked in insurance. He knew how claims worked. He knew what documentation was needed. He had connections at hospitals, with doctors, with funeral homes. All from his years investigating claims. If anyone could pull off faking their own death, it would be someone who investigated insurance fraud for a living. I felt like I was losing my mind. But I had to know. I had to find out if I was crazy, or if my impossible theory was somehow true. I looked at Simone's Facebook page again. Her profile said she lived in Houston. Her recent photos were tagged at locations in Houston. She was still there. Marcus had died in Houston, or supposedly died. What if he never left? I made a decision. I booked a flight to Houston for the next day. Monday morning. I told Keisha I needed to take care of some business related to Marcus's estate. Not technically a lie. She offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. The flight was short, just 2 hours from Atlanta to Houston. I rented a car at the airport. I had looked up Simone's address. She had checked in at her apartment complex enough times on Facebook that I knew exactly where she lived. Westwood Park Apartments. A nice complex on the west side of Houston. Not cheap. I drove there Monday afternoon. It took 40 minutes in traffic. When I pulled into the parking lot, my hands were shaking. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to calm down. What was I doing here? What did I hope to find? I didn't have a plan. I just knew I had to see for myself. I parked where I could see the building entrance, and I waited. I had no idea if Simone was even home. No idea what I would do if I saw her. But I waited anyway. 2 hours passed. I was starting to think this was a waste of time when the building door opened. A woman walked out. Simone. I recognized her from her photos. She was wearing yoga pants and a tank top, her hair in a high ponytail. She walked to a silver Honda Accord and got in. I waited until she pulled out of the parking lot. Then I followed her. She drove to a grocery store about a mile away. I parked several spots away and watched as she went inside. This was it. This was my chance. If Marcus was alive and living with her, I might be able to see him. I waited by my car, trying to look casual. Just a woman checking her phone in a parking lot. Nothing suspicious. 20 minutes later, Simone came out pushing a cart with several bags of groceries. She loaded them into her trunk. Then she got in and drove back toward her apartment. I followed at a distance. She pulled back into the parking lot. But instead of parking in the main lot, she pulled around to the back of the building where there were garages. She used a remote to open one of the garage doors. I drove past slowly, watching. She pulled into the garage, and before the door closed, I saw something that made my heart stop. Another car in the garage. A dark blue Chevy Malibu. Marcus had rented a Chevy Malibu on his last trip to Houston. I remembered because he had complained about it in one of his last texts to me. Said it drove like a boat. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I kept driving. I circled around and parked in the main lot again. I sat there shaking. This couldn't be real. But that car, and the watch, and the photos, it was all adding up. I waited for another hour. It was getting dark now. And then I saw something that confirmed my worst fears. The apartment door opened. Simone came out, and behind her, holding grocery bags, was a man. A black man with short hair, wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt. He was laughing at something she said. And even from across the parking lot, even in the fading light, I knew. It was Marcus, my dead husband, very much alive. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there in my car, watching him, watching them. They looked so happy, so comfortable, like a normal couple coming home from the grocery store. Like he wasn't supposed to be dead. Like he hadn't left me to believe I was a widow. Like he hadn't faked his own death and stolen $500,000. They went inside. The door closed, and I sat there in the parking lot as the sun set, as the streetlights came on, as the world kept turning. And I realized that my husband had betrayed me in a way I never could have imagined. He didn't just cheat on me. He didn't just steal. He faked his own death. He let me grieve him. He let me cry over his casket. He let his mother throw herself on his coffin screaming. He put us all through hell. And for what? Money? A new life? Freedom? I felt a rage building inside me that I had never felt before. A cold, calculated fury. Marcus thought he had gotten away with it. He thought he was safe. He thought I would never know. But he was wrong. I started the car and drove back to my hotel. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up planning, thinking, figuring out my next move. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. First, I needed proof. Real, concrete proof. Not just my word. Not just photos where you might be able to see someone who looked like Marcus. I needed video. Clear images. Documentation. I went back to the apartment complex Tuesday morning. I parked in a different spot this time, with a better view. I had my phone ready to record. I waited. At 8:30 a.m., the apartment door opened. Marcus came out, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt like he was going to work. He got into the Chevy Malibu and drove away. I followed him. He drove to an office park, pulled into the parking lot of a building that had a medical supply company, an accounting firm, and a few other businesses. He went into the accounting firm. So he had a job, a new identity probably, a new life. I took photos of everything. The building, his car, the license plate, him walking in. Then I went back to the apartment. Simone left an hour later, also dressed for work. I didn't follow her. I already knew where she worked. I went back to my hotel. I needed to make some calls. First, I called a friend who was a private investigator. Dante. We had known each other since college. He owed me a favor. I told him what I had found. He was shocked, but he agreed to help. He had contacts in Houston. He could dig up information. Within 24 hours, Dante called me back. He had run the license plate on the Chevy Malibu. It was registered to a David Miller. He had gotten a photo of David Miller's driver's license from his DMV contact. He sent it to me. I opened the image on my phone. It was Marcus's face. Different name, but same face, same person. Dante had also found where David Miller worked. Phillips and Associates, a small accounting firm. David Miller had been working there for 3 months. Since June, 6 weeks after Marcus died, or supposedly died. Dante had also gotten information on Simone Winters, confirmed where she worked. Medical receptionist at a clinic. She and David Miller listed the same address. They were living together as a couple. Everything I suspected was true. Marcus had faked his death, assumed a new identity, and was living in Houston with his mistress. Now I needed to figure out how he had pulled it off. I called the hospital in Houston again. This time I asked more specific questions. Who had pronounced Marcus dead? Dr. Richard Valdez. Where was Dr. Valdez now? No longer working at that hospital. He had left 2 months after Marcus's death. That was suspicious. I asked for his contact information, but they wouldn't give it to me. So I had Dante track him down. Dr. Valdez now worked at a small clinic in a suburb of Dallas. Interesting. I called the funeral home that had handled Marcus's body. Asked more questions. Who had delivered the body? Who had prepared it? Who had been present? The funeral director gave me names. I had Dante look into them. 2. One of the names was a mortician who no longer worked for that funeral home. He had quit a week after Marcus's funeral. He now worked at a different funeral home in San Antonio. Another person who had moved on quickly after being involved in Marcus's death. The pieces were falling into place. Marcus had paid people off. The doctor who pronounced him dead. The mortician who prepared the body. But whose body was it if not Marcus? That was the question I couldn't answer. Maybe there had never been a body. Maybe the casket we buried was empty. Maybe the person I identified at the hospital wasn't actually dead, just unconscious or drugged. Maybe the whole thing was smoke and mirrors. I didn't know, but I knew enough. I had proof Marcus was alive. I had proof he was living under a fake name. I had proof of his fraud. Now I needed to decide what to do with that proof. Part of me wanted to just walk into that apartment and confront him, scream at him, demand answers, but that wouldn't accomplish anything except make me feel better for 5 minutes. No, I needed to be smart about this. I needed to make sure he paid for what he did. Really paid. Not just got caught, but lost everything. Just like he made me lose everything. I flew back to Atlanta on Wednesday. I called my lawyer as soon as I landed. Her name was Patricia. She had handled our wills and some other legal matters over the years. I trusted her. I went to her office Thursday morning. I brought all the evidence I had gathered. The bank statements, the emails, the photos, the information Dante had found. Patricia listened to everything. Her eyes got wider and wider as I talked. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. This is huge, Camille. If all of this is true, and I believe you that it is, Marcus has committed multiple felonies. Insurance fraud, faking his own death, identity theft. The list goes on. I know, I said. I want him arrested. I want him prosecuted. I want him to go to prison. But I also want my life back. I want people to know I didn't do anything wrong. Patricia nodded. First thing we need to do is report this to the police, both here and in Houston. We also need to report it to his former employer and to the insurance company that paid out the death benefit. They will absolutely want that money back. From him, not you. You were a victim here, too. What about the funeral? I asked. We buried an empty casket. Or a casket with someone else in it. Is that even legal? Patricia grimaced. That's going to be complicated. We may need to have the casket exhumed to find out what's actually in it. But let's take this one step at a time. We spent the next 2 hours going over everything. Patricia made copies of all my evidence. She drafted a detailed statement. She contacted a detective she knew at the Atlanta Police Department who specialized in fraud cases. By Friday morning, I was sitting in an interview room at the police station, telling my story to Detective Morrison. He was a tall white man in his 50s with gray hair and a kind face. He listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions. When I showed him the evidence, his expression hardened. This is one of the most elaborate fraud cases I've ever seen, he said. And I've seen a lot. We're going to need to coordinate with Houston PD. We'll also need to bring in the FBI since this crosses state lines and involves mail fraud, wire fraud, and insurance fraud. All federal crimes. How long will this take? I asked. I just want it to be over. Detective Morrison sighed. These cases can take months, sometimes years, but based on what you've shown me, we have enough to get warrants. We'll move as quickly as we can. Over the next 2 weeks, things move fast. Detective Morrison worked with Houston police. They got warrants. They raided the apartment where Marcus and Simone were living. I wasn't there for it, but Detective Morrison called me right after to tell me how it went. We got him, he said. He tried to run when he saw us coming. Didn't get very far. Simone was there too. She's being charged as an accomplice. Both of them are in custody. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was really over. They arrested him. He couldn't run anymore. Within a few days, more information came out. The FBI investigated the doctor and the mortician who had helped Marcus. Both of them confessed to their roles. Marcus had paid them each $50,000 to help him fake his death. The body I had identified at the hospital was actually a homeless man who had died of a drug overdose. Marcus had found him through contacts in his fraud scheme. He paid the mortician to substitute the body, to make it look enough like him that I wouldn't question it. The mortician had worked fast, done some cosmetic work, made sure I didn't get too close a look. And I hadn't. I had been in shock. I had identified him quickly and left. I didn't want to stay in that room any longer than I had to. Marcus had counted on that. He had counted on my grief, my shock, my desire to get out of there. And his plan had worked. We buried a homeless man in Marcus's grave. Marcus walked away with $500,000 in life insurance money, plus whatever he had stolen from his fraud scheme. And he started a new life. Until I found him. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. Patricia told me I would probably have to testify. I said I wanted to. I wanted to look Marcus in the eye and tell him exactly what he had done to me. When the day finally came, I walked into that courtroom with my head held high. I wore a navy blue suit. I had my hair done. I looked put together. Strong. Not like the broken widow I had been. Marcus was sitting at the defendant's table with his lawyer. He looked smaller somehow. Defeated. He didn't look at me when I walked in. The prosecutor called me to the stand. I was sworn in. And then I told my story. I talked about finding the bank statements, finding the emails, realizing Marcus had been cheating, stealing, lying. I talked about flying to Houston, seeing him alive, the shock, the betrayal. I talked about identifying a body at the hospital that I thought was my husband, going to his funeral, grieving him. The prosecutor asked me how it felt to find out the truth. I looked directly at Marcus. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. It felt like being murdered, I said. He killed my trust. He killed my love. He killed the life we had built together. He killed the person I thought I was. And he did it all for money. For a new life that didn't include me. He made me a widow while he was still alive. That's cruel in a way I can't even describe. When I finished testifying, I walked past Marcus's table. He finally looked up at me. There were tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I didn't stop. I didn't respond. His apology meant nothing. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Marcus guilty on all counts: insurance fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, faking his death, identity theft. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. Simone got 5 years as an accomplice. The doctor and mortician got 3 years each for their roles. The insurance company sued Marcus for the $500,000. They couldn't get it all back. He had spent a lot of it, but they got what was left. They told me I could keep the money I had received since I had been an innocent victim. But I didn't want it. Blood money. I donated most of it. Some to charity. Some to the family of the homeless man we had buried. They deserve something. Deserve to know what happened to him. Deserve to give him a proper burial. It took a year for everything to be resolved. A year of hearings and depositions and lawyers and phone calls. But finally it was done. Marcus was in prison. The truth was out. My name was cleared. I wasn't a widow anymore. I was a survivor. I sold the house. Too many memories. Too many lies soaked into the walls. I bought a small condo in a different part of Atlanta. Started fresh. I kept teaching. The kids kept me grounded. Kept me focused on the future instead of the past. Keisha was there through all of it. My rock. My best friend. She never once said I told you so, even though she easily could have. Some days were hard. Some days I was angry. Some days I was sad. But most days I was okay. Better than okay. I was free. Free of a man who never deserved me. Free of lies. Free to build a real life. The kind of life I actually wanted. A few months after the trial ended, I got a letter. From Marcus. Sent from the federal prison where he was serving his time. I almost threw it away. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The letter was long. Pages and pages of explanations and apologies. He said he had gotten in over his head with the fraud. Said he was scared of getting caught. Said faking his death seemed like the only way out. He said he never meant to hurt me. That he did love me. But he loved his freedom more. He said he was sorry. That he understood if I never forgave him. He said a lot of things. I read the whole letter. Then I tore it up and threw it away. His words didn't matter. His apologies didn't matter. What mattered was that I had survived. I had found the truth. I had gotten justice. And I had come out the other side, stronger than I had ever been. 6 months after my husband died, I saw him alive at the grocery store and followed him home. And that decision changed everything. It gave me back my life. It gave me back my truth. And it taught me that I am stronger than I ever knew. The story ends there. But my life goes on. And it's a good life. A real life. An honest life. The kind of life Marcus never gave me. The kind of life I deserve.